Senator Markey, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Oh, great to be with you. Thank you.
Before we get into it, I want to share a little context with everyone about today's conversation. When we created ASP a couple of years ago, we hoped to build a platform of communication, not just between elected officials and their constituents, but we wanted to make a place where multi-partisan ideas could be exchanged and explained, and that maybe ASP could serve as a productive forum to help advance common ground solutions around today's problems. Following the tragic mass shootings across the country, including Buffalo, New York, and Uvalde, Texas, we invited lawmakers to speak to the AS community about gun control and school safety. And I think that it is worth mentioning that in preparation for this conversation, we went out to dozens of members of the Senate and governors to participate. And Senator Markey is the only one who agreed to show up today to answer questions from our community. Senator Markey has authored and introduced multiple pieces of gun legislation control legislation, including 2019's Making America Safe Act. So once again, thank you, Senator Markey, for joining us, and let's just get started.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for everything that you do to create a platform here with Chris to air these critical issues in our country. So thank you. It's great to be with you again.
Of course. Well, Mark and I had a few questions of our own for today's conversation, but we felt it was important for a group that is disproportionately affected by mass shootings, being students and teachers, to have their voices heard. So we're going to be sharing the questions submitted by our ASP community from across the country. So as of June 9th, there were at least 254 mass shootings in the U.S. this year alone, with at least 1,357 people shot and 278 deaths. Senator, why are so many lawmakers unwilling to speak up on this issue, to defend where they stand or bring ideas to the table?
Well, I would say that it just begins with the NRA and the incredible vise-like grip which the NRA has over too many members of Congress. You know, our goal has to be to turn NRA into not relevant anymore in American politics. And there has been an incredible groundswell of support for gun safety legislation to be passed this year. And it is in direct competition with the NRA and the Republican adherence to traditional NRA perspectives on these issues. But I think what's happened is that even as Republican senators cower in fear of the NRA, we now see children cowering in fear in schools all across our country. And it's touched something in our country. And we're hoping, we're not guaranteed, but we're hoping that it will lead to our ability to pass a meaningful gun safety bill in the next month here in the United States Senate. No guarantees, but we're going to work very hard to accomplish that goal.
Well, along those lines, the Senate, as you said, just announced this bipartisan deal on gun violence, which reportedly has the backing of at least the 10 Republicans needed to overcome a Senate filibuster. So can you tell us what is in this deal? How do you think it's going to tangibly help? And do you think it will actually get passed?
Well, there's no guarantees. We have conceptual agreement, but it hasn't actually been put on paper yet. And the devil and the angels are in the details. And it has yet to actually be determined what those provisions will include. But number one, a red flag law. Right now, if a husband has been abusing his spouse, there can be a red flag that's put on it and taking away a weapon he might have. But we don't have the same thing for boyfriends doing the same thing. So we need to find a way to make sure that we put red flags on people who might be suspicious, so that they get an extra level of background checking. And to that extent, we're putting millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars into a bill that will give states the funding that they need to do that. We need to expand mental health services as well. We have to crack down on gun trafficking and straw purchasing. A lot of what happens, Chris and I are from Massachusetts, is that there are straw men who are used to purchase the guns, let's say in Georgia or from another state down south, and then they just traffic them up to the Northeast. And the straw men are just considered to be very minor offenders. So here, what we're going to try to do is just to make sure that these individuals start to get the real attention, the real punishment, which they deserve as well. And then for young buyers, buyers 18 to 21, who are seeking to purchase weapons, they will get enhanced scrutiny, because we know that disproportionately a lot of these crimes get committed by 18 to 21-year-olds. And so there'll be a closer scrutiny to any criminal records that they might have, just to make sure that we're reducing the likelihood that a gun is being sold to someone who might use it in that 18 to 21-year-old category almost immediately after purchase.
One of the reasons for this conversation is that our young audience has asked for it and is demanding action on these issues. So for the rest of the conversation, we're going to turn it over to them so they can ask the questions. I want to thank everyone who submitted questions. We're going to get to as many as we can in today's conversation, but just know that ASP plans to continue asking lawmakers to respond to our student questions in the coming days, weeks, months to follow this discussion. So our first question is from Jack. He's a college junior in Pennsylvania, and it focuses on the role of national culture and what legislation can accomplish.
The United States has the highest gun ownership rate in the world, with 120 firearms per 100 people. That's nearly double the number of firearms in the country with the second highest gun ownership rate, the Falkland Islands, which averages at 62 firearms per 100 people. Does this staggering statistic represent an inviolable gun culture that's deeply ingrained in our country? Or does it represent needless gun ownership that ought to be lowered with gun control legislation?
Obviously, we do have the highest number of guns per capita of any country in the world. And it goes to, from my perspective, a misinterpretation of the Second Amendment, which actually calls for a well-regulated militia as a precondition to getting a gun. But that said, we have a responsibility to continue to work and to work hard to make sure that weapons of war that only belong in the battlefields of the world are not in the hands of people who should not have them. And those are the assault weapons. And we are not going to be able to reach that inside of this particular bill, but we have to continue to work in order to accomplish that goal. We were able in 1994 to pass a bill to ban assault weapons in the United States. And it went from 1994 to 2004. Then it expired. So we know we can do it because we've already done it. And we didn't do it as part of ancient history. We did it in recent political history. So I believe that the progress that we're going to make right now is going to be the building block for future progress that we're going to make, because these incidents are going to continue, unfortunately, but so won't the intensity of people in our country. They're not agonizing anymore. They're organizing. They're out there. And as a result, I think that notwithstanding the tripling of gun production in our country since the year 2000, there's now an army of activists on the other side who are up and in this political battle, and they're in it to win.
So now our next question came to us through our partners at Close Up Foundation. Close Up and Bridge USA helped us put this event together and did some of the outreach to the students across the country. So this question comes from Evan, who's an 11th grader from Arizona.
Should we raise the minimum age to buy high-capacity rifles from 18 to 21?
Absolutely. Makes no sense. Again, buying alcohol, you have to be 21. And to buy an assault weapon, you only have to be 18. Makes no sense at all. So to the extent to which, we are, trying to put in place common sense, gun safety laws, that's the only way that makes any sense at all. And if we do it, I think that we're doing it reflecting the fact that there's a much higher homicide rate amongst 18 to 21-year-olds than there is in people over the age of 21. And we're just using our own experience, our own common sense to make sure that those safeguards are there. and we know that gun manufacturers are actually marketing to younger people so that it's cool for people, to buy guns. In the same way they targeted kids with tobacco, and they still do. That they're doing it with guns as well. And I've actually asked the Federal Trade Commission to do an investigation of that, because I think it's an unfair and deceptive practice for the industry to be making these guns cool, having kind of headlines over it that would be attractive to young people, and giving them the ideation that they need to have one of these weapons. So, yes, the answer to your question is 18 to 21-year-olds should not have the ability to buy assault weapons or any weapon in our society.
One of the common themes in the questions we received was about whether guns or people were to blame. Allison, a junior at the University of Michigan, had this question.
There's been a lot of debate over whether to blame the gun or the offender for mass shootings. If we focus more on the human aspect, what kind of changes should be made in order to prevent these tragedies from occurring? Is it a matter of restricting who can own a gun, or is it more to do with training?
First, we have to make sure that we have common sense gun safety laws on the books. In Massachusetts, we have the strongest gun safety laws in the country. And as a result, we have dramatically lower gun violence fatalities. And it's directly related to the laws that we have on the books. So that's something that we have to create and incentivize to happen all across the country. In Massachusetts, our key law is if you want to get a gun license, you have to go in and see the police chief. So Chris is from Massachusetts. We have 351 cities and towns. If you want to buy a gun, you have to go in and see the chief. And the chief will talk to you. Maybe bring over the sergeant, see, ask them if they've had any problems in that house. And when it starts at that level, you begin the whole process then of not blaming the individual or blaming anything else. You can start to blame the lack of actual safeguards that are in place. If you want to buy alcohol, you better have an ID. You want to buy cigarettes, you better have an ID if you're a young person. But if you want to buy a gun, it's just too easy right now in our country. And so we just need the adults to finally step up, the members of the Senate, the members of the House, to finally step up and to just say we need a system in place that reflects this epidemic which we have. And we have to find a way of trying to deal with it in a way that other industrialized countries in the world do. You can get a gun, but you're going to go through a very, very tight screen to make sure that you're somebody who we can trust with that gun.
The topic of mental health is frequently brought up when discussing gun violence, and Hannah, who's a 12th grader from Michigan, has this question.
In light of the sharp increase of mental health crisis that Americans have been experiencing, what legislation can we put in place to hopefully provide better mental health care for adolescents?
Well, my wife is a psychiatrist, and my wife was the chief of behavioral medicine at the National Institutes of Health. So here's what I know. I do know that you need the ideation. You need to, think about something that you would do with a gun. You need some moment that kind of triggers, that action. And then you actually need the instrumentality. You need the weapon. So inside of this legislation, we're going to be adding, hopefully, billions of dollars for mental health treatment. But at the same time, we have to understand that they have the same level of mental health problems all over the industrialized world. But they don't have the same level of gun fatalities. They don't have the same number of incidents. So while we want to provide additional mental health services in our country, we should also recognize the fact that what really differentiates us is the number of guns that we have and the easy access to them. And that's where we have to continue to keep our focus even as we increase funding for mental health. We have to do both, but also realize that the real differentiating factor is the access to this large arsenal of weapons that we allow to be out on the streets of our country.
There have been several proposals for different ways to keep schools safe. Stephanie, a college junior in New York, has this question about campus safety.
To what extent do you think schools can increase their security? So beyond school shooting drills, door locking policies, and guest regulations, what else can a school do?
First of all, I would say that the burden of addressing gun violence should not be placed on schools. We need to make sure that we're dealing with the issue before it ever reaches a school door or a church door or a synagogue door or any other door in our country. And that just goes to the issue of making sure that it's very difficult for anyone to purchase a gun in our country. And it's not just some indiscriminate overnight way in which people can go out, purchase a gun, and then use it in a violent way. So I guess what I see it as requiring is interventions before it ever reaches the school door, and to have a better plan in place and funded, mental health issues as well, so that young people or old get the help which they need, which can avoid these catastrophic events. So that's my feeling about kind of the goals which some people have, which is to turn schools into armed camps. But ultimately, that's not going to be the answer. We're going to have to look at all these other issues and learn from other countries in the world, and just reduce the access to and the likelihood that people can successfully use these weapons.
So along those lines, an idea around school safety is arming teachers. And Danielle, who is an elementary school teacher in Montana, has a question specifically about that.
I want to know why there are discussions about arming teachers with guns. We aren't trusted to pick out what books our students can read, but we can be trusted with a gun.
Well, that's a great question. And arming teachers, according to research, it shows that the presence of a gun increases the risks posed to children and teachers. Schools who have safety experts and law enforcement officials oppose arming teachers, and so do I. Teachers just should be allowed to just focus on their jobs, to do their jobs, to teach, and they shouldn't have to be worried about a fear of a mass shooter coming into their schools. And so from my perspective, I just think that's the approach which we have to take, and not have to implicate every teacher in the country as part of this defense system. Evidence shows that would not be successful.
A number of questions focused on finding the balance between Second Amendment rights and safety, like this one from Braden, a junior at Indiana University, Bloomington.
What are solutions we can focus on that do not impact law-abiding gun owners while still addressing the most relevant issues related to suicides, mass shootings, and inner-city violence?
Well, again, I think that's what we're trying to do with this bipartisan legislation that Senator Murphy and Senator Cornyn are negotiating right now. We need to find ways to incentivize every state in our country to put red flag laws on the books, boyfriend protection laws, to not allow for straw men to be purchasing guns and pretending that they're just good, solid citizens. And we need enhanced background checks as well. So all of those are the things that we should try to work together on a bipartisan basis to put on the books in our country, and to use this moment to create bipartisanship and to straight arm out the NRA, which has just absolutely controlled this deliberative process for decades in our country. This is a historic moment, and we've got a chance here on a bipartisan basis to do something which is good.
You think it'll actually pass?
Again, I'm hopeful. I don't put anything past the NRA, plus the gun Owners Action League, all of these groups that are out there, they're descending on Washington right now. They're descending on this city and on all the senators and House members right now. So we haven't even got it into print yet, what the bill's going to look like. And time is important because historically what the NRA has done is wait until the final funeral of the last victim has passed and then hope that attention dies down. And then it all goes away for them. So that's why we have to move quickly right now. I'm hopeful, but I'm not unrealistic because I've seen the NRA do their dirty work so many times in the past. So we're all working very hard to get it done.
Senator, thank you so much for joining. As I said, we really appreciate you being the only senator who showed up at this point to talk to us. We received a lot of questions from everybody throughout the ASP community, many students and teachers. We will continue to ask those questions to anyone in the government wanting to hear what they have to say as this hopefully progress continues. But thank you so much for sitting with Chris and I in this ASP chat.
And by the way, thank you for doing this, because all issues go from education to activation to implementation, and you provide this education and activation component of the movement, of the moment that we're in right now.
Well said. And I just want to echo what Mark said at the top of this, because it is something that's just been beyond frustrating for everyone here at ASP. When Mark and I began this, we knew we were going to be sitting down with a lot of elected officials that we disagreed with, sometimes adamantly. But we felt strongly that the way forward in the political landscape was that if you chose to ignore the people's opinions who were different from your own, specifically elected officials who are already in office and have power, we felt that was more pernicious than making this a landscape of competing ideas where the best idea wins, and forcing elected officials to stand by their beliefs and have open discussions. And as a result, like I said, we sat down with a lot of people that we disagreed with strongly. It's been incredibly frustrating knowing that some of those elected officials that we sat with are still using this site today and refused to have this discussion. Elected officials that I know that we at ASP feel strongly that certain elected officials are directly connected to this very issue. And it's beyond maddening. And I just want to thank again Senator Markey for having this discussion. You're the only one who was willing to do it. And it's just a real testament to your sense of duty and honor. And I got nothing but respect for you. Thank you again.
Thank you. And I appreciate you guys. Okay, you have no idea how important you are to be the counter to the propaganda, that is paid for by the NRA. We're in a big fight, and you guys are a critical part because of your credibility for us to ultimately get this bill over the finish line. So thank you for everything you're doing as well.
Thank you, Senator.